Hey everyone, welcome to PhoneArena's in-depth video review of the BlackBerry Torch 9800. It's going to be available starting on August 12th with the contract price of $199, so it pretty much stays the same with other high-end smartphones that we've been checking out of late. But what makes the Torch very unique is the fact that it employs a new form factor, a portrait slider form that we haven't really seen from RIM's camp. So you have a portrait-style QWERTY keyboard on top of that with a touchscreen. And the other thing about it is the fact that it uses the latest version of the platform, BlackBerry OS 6, which of course caters to the needs of business professionals. But on top of that, it also has some elements that make it perfect for the everyday consumer. So we'll check it out, see if this BlackBerry device has what it takes to compete with the growing competition in the form of Android devices and even the iPhone. Like we said, the unique thing about the Torch 9800 is the fact that it's the very first slider handset from RIM's camp. And you can tell that it borrows some design elements found on the Bold 9700 just because of the general outline, and the Storm 2 just with the touchscreen. It also reminds us of the Palm Pre just because of the overall form factor, but you're not going to be cutting any cheese with this one here. It's a little bit curved towards the edge, but it's not as sharp. We do like the fact that they have the chrome plates all around the handset to give it a really nice accent. And of course the back cover, it has that soft touch feeling material. It's kind of ribbed, so it does provide for a pretty good grip in the hand, and the overall choice of material is pretty good. It's pretty high end, as we could tell. It's normal size. It's not too overly bulky, but you definitely notice the weight in your pockets. Construction, durability, feels pretty solid. We don't question its there's no wiggle or loose movements with the handset, so we're pretty satisfied. And you can definitely tell from far away that it's just like any other BlackBerry handset before it. When you pair on the handset for the very first time, you're going to be greeted to its 3.2-inch touchscreen display, and unlike the Storm 2, it has just a static touchscreen. It's capacitive technology. It doesn't employ the SurePress technology found on the Storm 2, so there's no gimmicks. It's just like any other touchscreen handsets out there, which is surprisingly good. It has a resolution of 360 by 480, and when you compare that to something like some other handsets that sport WVGA display resolutions, it's kind of lackluster. We could definitely tell that text still somewhat could be a little bit on the smaller side, even though when you combine it with the small size screen, the detail is pretty average, and we didn't have too much of an issue viewing it in outdoor conditions just because it has good viewing angles. Right below that, you have at first they look like touch-sensitive buttons just because they're all flush to the surface, but in fact they're actually physical buttons, and you have your send and your BlackBerry menu key in the back. And of course you'll find the optical trackpad, which actually works with the handset. You could actually rely on it instead of the touchscreen, and it works both ways. On the left-hand side, you just have the micro USB port for charging and data connection. And on the right, you have the dedicated shutter key to launch the camera application. You no longer have the convenience key on both left and right. And you also have the volume rocker. They have this rubberized feeling to them to make it pretty good, and they're fairly well sized, so a very good button press to them. You have the 3.5mm headset jack here, and on the top, it kind of is hard to see, but it's actually built into the surface. You have your buttons for mute and also the lock on top with the notch here for the speakerphone. On the back, you have the 5-megapixel camera with flash, LED flash. And when you remove the back cover, it's just a little bit of flimsy plastic material. It'll give you access to the SIM card slot, the battery, and also micro SD card slot. There's a solid opening and closing mechanism with the Torch 9800. All you gotta do is just give it a slight nudge, and it's gonna lock itself into place. And we didn't find any evidence of any wiggle issues with the touchscreen. When you have it open, it's gonna expose the portrait-style QWERTY keyboard, which is actually reminiscent and actually the same one found on the Bold 9700 and 9650. But instead, it's a little bit flat. It's not as prominent or raised just because of the fact that it has to be concealed underneath the touchscreen. At first, it might feel a little bit stiff, but after a while, we found it to be a pretty good experience. It has a nice, decent response when you push down. People with large fingers might have a little bit of an issue just because keys are a little bit cramped and there's no spacing between. But after a while, we found it to be pretty useful, and it lives up to any other handsets before it. So we all know by now that RIM has been working on OS 6 for quite some time, and it's being positioned as a consumer-friendly platform geared for the everyday user, and on top of that, being able to cater still to their existing user base. So if you use a BlackBerry before, you're going to fit right in with this. as far as presentation level goes, you definitely notice that it borrows some elements found on BlackBerry OS 5, such as the icons and look. The feel and look of the platform, it's not as nice or glitzy compared to something like Android, and it's being powered by a 624 megahertz processor, so it does a decent job. It's definitely not the snappiest. Sometimes there's a slight delay, but it's not that bad at all. So you have your app tray here. You could put it all the way down to keep it away, and you could put it up to different levels to give you some access to some common functions. And of course, you could press it all the way up to reveal all of them. Now they're broken down to 5 different folders. You have one for downloads, media, favorites, all, and of course frequent. So there's not really this is how the folders work, and you can move around the icons, so there's some level of personalization with that. On the top here, if you press this here, that's the notification bar. So you click that, it's going to provide you all the notifications on the handsets, which is nice just because it's a centralized hub, so you could see everything at once. You have stuff like Facebook comments, your emails, text messages, and even calendar events that'll show up. To the left, you click that button, you're going to have the profile selection, and just have access to that really quick from the home screen. And on the right, you press this magnify icon. It's going to give you a universal search, so you just start typing away on the keyboard, and it's going to populate some of the associated items with it, such as applications, contacts, and even Facebook. And of course, you could always use search Google. So it's not something new. It's been seen already on other platforms like WebOS, iOS, and even Android. And you click the top where the clock's at, it's going to give you connections options, so you can turn on the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth really quick. So the platform is really nice. It's not groundbreaking or revolutionary. It follows in a similar footstep as previous handsets, and it works well for any BlackBerry user out there. So what's nice to see on BlackBerry OS 6 is the fact that they finally integrated social networking into the mix, into some of the core applications on the handset. So for example, if you click on contacts, so you have your contacts in there, but if you put in a Facebook or even Twitter, the device is going to automatically populate everything together, so it's going to combine specific contacts and profiles with different users. So if you click someone, it's going to show you their Facebook photo and be able to actually send a comment or even a wall posting or a Twitter message to them directly. There's this app on here called Social Feeds. So when you launch it, it's a centralized hub for all your social networking and also instant messaging clients. So you could talk or chat with people directly on here. You have Windows Live Messenger, Yahoo Messenger. You even have others such as, let's take a look here, MySpace. You have AOL Instant Messenger, Twitter, so you could look through all your tweets, and you have also Google Talk and Facebook. So it's really nice, just the fact that it caters to those individuals, and it's definitely just something refreshing that we don't see too often from a business-oriented device. If you plan on using the on-screen keyboard instead of the physical one-type messages, you're going to have a lot at your disposal to use. So first off, you have the portrait style one. It's a little bit cramped and narrow, so people with larger fingers will probably have a little bit of hard time typing away. But as you can tell, as I'm typing here, it's fairly responsive. It's keeping up pace, which is really nice. We like the fact it's quite usable. At first, you have that instinct to actually push down the screen, just like on the Storm 2, but after a while, you figure it out, and it works really well. The other options available to you for on-screen keyboards, you have the reduced keyboard, and you also have the multi-tap keyboard here. So 3 different portrait options, and when you tilt it to the side, in landscape, you're going to have the full keyboard, which is a little bit better than the on-screen ones, just a little bit more room. But overall, you could even use the physical one if you want to use that. We're happy to say that RIM has finally joined the ranks of some of the competition just because they employ a WebKit-based browser. So the experience is a lot more gratifying compared to previous iterations. So the stock browser on the Torch 9800 works pretty good, and the experience is more than tolerable. So you have our page here. It's zoomed out right now, and it took approximately 1 minute to load up. And once everything is loaded, scrolling is not that bad at all. You could double tap to zoom in a particular spot, and it automatically will resize the text to fit the length of the page. There's also multi-tap gestures, so you could pinch to zoom out or pinch to zoom in. So it's nice to have that. but we do find that sometimes it takes a little bit of time to re-render pages when you're scrolling really quick. So images or even text can take a little bit of time just to load up. The one thing that we found surprising with the handset is that sometimes it doesn't render the page properly, and we'll show you right now. So we'll have our page here. So text, if I double-click on the text area, as you can tell, it's kind of just spaced apart, making it very hard to read the text. So we're not sure if this is a bug or some sort, but it's definitely on there. If you zoom out, it will load up the page, and as you can tell, text a little bit harder to see, but you can still kind of make it out if you put in the landscape. But overall, though, we're pretty satisfied. Definitely better from what we've seen in the past. The nice thing about OS 6 too is the fact that they've also revamped the media player on the handset, with the platform. So we're just going to load up a song here and show you what we mean. The music player itself might look somewhat similar to what we've seen in the past, but as you can see here, it employs like these 3D effects, almost like cover flow, fairly smooth and very responsive, so it gives you a nice appealing look. As far as sound from the speakerphone, when you have audio boost enabled, it does a better job in producing some strong tones, but at higher levels it tends to have somewhat of a screechy tone to it. Watching videos on the Torch 9800 is pretty much what you expect out of any touchscreen device with a decently sized display. So the one we have here is encoded in MPEG-4, 480 by 320 resolution, and as you can tell, it's really smooth. No evidence of any lag or slowdown, and audio is pretty much on sync with it. But when we load up one in 640 by 480 resolution, we saw a huge difference in performance. It started to stutter and even slow down. But overall, it's quite usable, and we didn't find too many faults with playing videos, especially when they're in lower resolution. The 5-megapixel autofocus camera on the BlackBerry Torch 9800 managed to produce some okay-looking images. As you can tell with the interface, though, it's pretty much barren and remains unchanged from what we saw in the Storm 2, and it doesn't offer as many options as we would like. By default, the camera application is set to do continuous focus, but if you set it to single shot, taking photos is pretty simple. All you gotta do is just slightly press the shutter key, push it all the way down, take the shot. Image quality outdoors was the best. It had a lot of detail, but in all lighting conditions, it looked overcast, so images were pretty dark, even indoors with plenty of lighting. When we used the flash, it managed to illuminate our shots fairly well, and there wasn't that much noise to them. But in complete dark settings, it just tended to be overexposed. The last thing that we noticed that the handset had a difficult time producing macro shots or close-up shots, just because it had a hard time actually focusing in on an object. Sadly, the Torch 9800 lacks HD video recording, which is becoming extremely prevalent among the high-end smartphones out there. Instead, what we're treated to is video capture of 640 by 480 VGA videos, which is okay resolution, decent detail. There's this anti-shake mode you can set so it looks less jittery, but most people will find it fairly workable for their taste, but when you compare it to high-definition recording on some of the other devices out there, it easily pales in comparison to them. As far as calling quality goes on the Torch 9800, on our caller's end, they said our voice sounded rather mute in tone, but there wasn't any background noise, so it made our conversation still more than audible. On our end, voices were normal sounding, no evidence of any distortion, but unfortunately, though, earpiece volume was kind of lacking. It's kind of weak, even when we set to its loudest setting. When we switched over to the speakerphone, though, it did produce some stronger tones, but they were muffled sounding. Signal strength was fairly good too. We didn't notice any issues as far as drop calls or fluctuations in the signal strength. And finally, the best thing about the handset has to be its battery life. It's pretty phenomenal. We managed to get 1 day's use of heavy usage, internet browsing, and also text messaging, and managed to put up fairly well. And we had a little bit more juice the next morning, so we're happy to say that just like other BlackBerry handsets out there, the Torch 9800 will do a great job in battery life. So let's get the obvious out of the way. The BlackBerry Torch 9800 is a fantastic device for any traditional BlackBerry users out there, just because of the refreshing new form factor that we haven't seen from RIM's camp before up until now. If you're sporting a bold 9650 or 9700, you'll fit in with this handset really quick. The other thing about the handset is, of course, BlackBerry OS 6. Although it does implement social networking into the mix and attempts to be a little bit more consumer-friendly as opposed to strictly relying on their business end, it doesn't feel as compelling as, say, something Android 2.1 or iOS 4. It just doesn't feel as complete or polished. So that's one area that RIM will really need to look at in order to stay competitive in this market. When it's priced at $199 on contract, and you look at the other handsets available at that price point, like the iPhone 4, the HTC Vivo 4G, the Motorola Droid 2, and even Samsung Galaxy S, it makes it a very difficult decision or a compelling argument to side with this one over those. But RIM's they're going to require a lot of work with the platform to get up to the same level as the others if they want to stay competitive. So if you'd like to learn more about this handset or for all the latest cell phone reviews, news specs, and information, you can check us out at PhoneArena.com.